Hello, Scotty Reed here with a Black Talk Radio News commentary. I want to provide you some commentary on this tweet I came across by a political reporter by the name of Kyle Cheney. For those that are watching the video, you can see right there where it says inbox FBI agents association calls on Congress to make domestic terrorism a federal crime. Now, if you look at some of the tweets, you have people questioning this statement saying, hey, wait a minute, domestic terrorism isn't already a crime? Of course it is already a crime. And what we have here is a lobbying group for active FBI agents and former FBI agents trying to provide cover as to why the FBI has not been doing anything to target racist white supremacists in the United States who have been committing acts of terrorism but have not been charged with acts of terrorism. Okay, let me just read the full statement that was put out by the FBI Agents Association statement on need for congressional action on domestic terrorism. It says, domestic terrorism is a threat to the American people and our democracy. Acts of violence intended to intimidate a civilian population or to influence or affect government policy should be prosecuted as domestic terrorism regardless of the ideology behind them. FBIAA, that's the name of this association, continues to urge Congress to make domestic terrorism a federal crime. This would ensure that FBI agents and prosecutors have the best tools to fight domestic terrorism. Just so you know who this organization is, here's a little bit more about them. The FBI Agents Association is an organization dedicated to providing support and advocacy to active and former special agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Membership includes more than 14,000 active and former special agents of the FBI. For more information, you can visit them at fbiaa.org. And this is straight up BS is what it is. Now, I don't understand why some people have access to the internet and they just don't use a multitude of search engines to find out information. So if you was wondering if domestic terrorism was already a federal crime, then all you would have needed to do was do a search. Is terrorism or domestic terrorism a federal crime? Well, I did a search and I came up with several results, and I'm going to share this with you from the ACLU. Now, without even doing my search, the first thing that came to my mind was the Patriot Act. And when I found the article posted by the ACLU, how the US Patriot Act redefines domestic terrorism, I already knew the answer. Section 802, according to the ACLU, of the U.S. Patriot Act, published, I'm not going to give the numbers and all that, but it expanded the definition of terrorism to cover domestic as opposed to international terrorism. A person engages in domestic terrorism if they do an act dangerous to human life that is a violation of the criminal laws of a state or the United States, if the act appears to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, hence the El Paso terrorist attack. Influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion. To affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. Additionally, the acts have to occur primarily within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States, and if they do not, may be regarded as international terrorism. Section 802 does not create a new crime of domestic terrorism. However, it does expand the type of conduct that the government can investigate when it is investigating terrorism. The USA Patriot Act expanded governmental powers to investigate terrorism, and some of these powers are applicable to domestic terrorism. Now, just go back into your memory. Think about Dylan Roof. That was a terrorist act. Just think about a number of these white supremacist shootings and killings, massacres, if you will. And what are they always charged with? They're never charged with domestic terrorism. They're always charged with federal laws or state laws, crimes that are already on the books, like murder and stuff like that. Then, in addition to that, you have hate crimes. Hate crimes is what? In targeting an individual based on his race, his religion, or their national origin. So, the FBI already has the tools that it needs through the USA Patriot Act to target white supremacists in terrorist investigations. But why aren't they? Well, I would submit to you that the FBI is an institutional racist organization. If you don't know the history of the FBI, I will give you one word that you should look up: COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO under J. Edgar Hoover, and people want to act like this was 150 years ago. No, J. Edgar Hoover was not 150 years ago. But you had the FBI targeting black and leftist leaders. That would include, the American Indian groups. That would include Puerto Rican independence groups and individuals and what have you. Okay? And they targeted them. They worked with the mainstream media to demonize these people or organizations. And then they also carried out assassinations of various black leaders. Okay? So you have to understand the history of the FBI to understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. They are an appendage of white supremacy in this country. And the reason that they don't investigate these people is because, hey, maybe they don't want to target their white supremacist brothers and sisters as white supremacists, as domestic terrorists. Now, also think back to 2006, the FBI put out a report, said that white supremacists were infiltrating law enforcement. That was in 2006, right? But did the Bush administration give a mandate to the FBI or the Justice Department to start setting up sting operations or undercover operations, like, or getting informants, paid informants in police departments to root out these white supremacists? No, they do not. I was just reading a story the other day about two Somali immigrants who lived here in the United States. One had become a nationalized citizen, and a FBI informant entrapped them by putting ideals in their head about supporting ISIS and providing them with money. And these guys were then arrested as they attempted to board a plane to go to Europe. I believe it was to Europe where they were going. This was just last week. And both of them were arrested as terrorists and charged with terrorism, providing material support to terrorism. I don't remember the exact charges. How come they can't do similar things to these white supremacist organizations? Okay, why aren't they infiltrating the police departments, planning undercover agents and what have you, and rooting out these terrorists? Well, I would surmise to you that that's because those white supremacists are also in the FBI. That's the most logical answer. Okay? Then, we just recently had a congressional hearing where FBI agents were, or representatives were being grilled by members of Congress, and they were questioned about the Black Identity Extremist Report. And they were forced to admit they had no basis to produce that report. And then on the heels of that report, they sent it out to these white supremacist law enforcement agencies, which then started targeting members of groups like Black Lives Matter. Okay. So all this letter to Congress is doing is trying to provide cover for why the FBI has not been doing its job and going after these racist white supremacists who have been carrying out heinous crimes against Americans and foreign nationals. The Patriot Act already gives them the tools that they need. All this association is doing is trying to hide that fact. And then let me also point out that over my years of reporting, I have reported on cases where the FBI has used the Patriot Act against environmentalists and animal rights activists. For example, just this year, The Intercept, Aline Brown published on March 23rd, 2019, this year. She writes that Joe Deeb's 12 years on the lam came to an end last August when Cuban authorities detained a 50-year-old environmental activist during a layover in Havana and turned him over to the United States. More than a decade earlier, police and FBI agents had arrested a dozen of Deeb's associates in the Animal Liberation Front and Earth Liberation Front within the span of a few months. They were charged with conspiring to burn down factories that slaughter animals for meat, timber mills that disrupted sensitive ecosystems, government facilities that pen wild horses, and a ski resort perched on a pristine mountaintop. Deeb, a former Microsoft software tester known for his ingenuity, had slipped away in the midst of it all. While the arsons, which never hurt or killed anyone, largely took place in the late 1990s, the wave of arrests known as the Green Scare came in a post-9/11 era, so this is after the Patriot Act, right? When terrorism was the FBI's prevailing obsession. The fur and biomedical industries had spent years lobbying the Justice Departments and lawmakers to go after eco-terrorists who had damaged their property, held audacious demonstrations decrying their business activities, and cost them millions of dollars. When the planes hit the Twin Towers, industry groups seized on opportunity to push legislation, and federal law enforcement ramped up pursuit of radical activists in the name of counterterrorism. These are Americans. So they had all the tools they needed in terms of fighting domestic terrorism on behalf of corporations, and targeted these Americans, these activists. All right. So again, I ask you, what is the FBI Agents Association really doing here? Because the evidence is clear. The Patriot Act gives them the tools they need to go after white supremacist terrorists. What it shows me is that they don't have the will. Perhaps because they're white supremacists themselves. All right, this has been Scotty Reed with a Black Talk Radio News Commentary. Please continue to support the nonprofit organization Black Talk Media Project. You can go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, the world's number one, not according to us, but according to independent research firm, the number one independent digital black radio and podcasting platform. You make a donation there, and they are tax deductibles. Peace.